When a well-to-do family decided to take a break in France back in 1785, the last thing they expected was to be caught up in a terrifying haunting within a building that was the location of an inconceivable act that could have been dismissed as a made-up tale, if not for the physical proof left behind. I'm Bleaki, and today I'm going to show you the story of the man in the iron cage, which I discovered in a book I read on a recent vacation to Wales called Lord Halifax's Ghost Book, which was published in its entirety in 1939. While some of the ghost stories in this book seem a little unbelievable, including one about a vampire cat, one really piqued my interest, with it involving a tale of greed, betrayal, neglect and torture, with a chilling memento in the attic of the old building that gave credibility to this chilling haunting. Lord Halifax's Ghost Book is a collection of real-life ghost stories collected by Charles Lindley Wood, the second Viscount Halifax, throughout his life, but were kept private until his son, the third Viscount Halifax, who was also named Charles Wood, chose his father's favourite tales and released them as a book. Viscount Halifax was born in London in 1839 and had a lengthy career in the English Church Union and served in the Royal and Yeomanry Cavalry during the French Revolutionary Wars and raised to the rank of Deputy Lieutenant. Among the many ghost stories, the case of the man in the iron cage just happened to be the favourite of Lord Halifax. In fact, according to a Leeds Library's blog post, it was this story that Lord Halifax asked to be read to him on his deathbed. Nothing softens the notion of imminent death like a story about a man imprisoned in the same horrible place he thought he would escape in death. The story of the man in the iron cage was given to Lord Halifax by Elizabeth Pennyman, a member of the family who experienced the haunting firsthand. The original version of this story, later known as the garbled version, had been published anonymously in the third publication of the album in 1822 and was later republished in the accredited Ghost Stories book written by T.M. Jarvis. This was around 40 years before Lord Halifax was given the true version by the Pennyman family, which made it into his private collection. Elizabeth Pennyman was quite critical of the original version, saying that no family member of hers could have written it as a first-hand account as there were too many errors, including names. For example, the original writer said the haunting happened in Lisle when it actually happened in Lille. In their defence, if I waited 40 years to tell a story, I'd probably forget my own name, let alone other details. In the autumn of 1785, Lord and Lady Pennyman took Elizabeth, her sister Hannah, and one of her brothers, Charles, to France to indulge in the culture and improve the French language of their children. Who takes their kids on vacation to work on their education? That's like telling your kids you're taking them to McDonald's but forgetting to mention that they'll be helping out on the Big Mac assembly line. The Pennymans decided to expand the vacation but found their first property uncomfortable, so they began looking for a new house to spend the rest of the autumn in, a decision that inadvertently led to even more discomfort. Shortly after, the father, Sir James, discovered a very large building in Place du Lion d'Or in Lille, which the family took a liking to. The Pennymans were surprised with how low the rent was and agreed to take on a lease and moved in immediately. I mean, that'd be my first red flag. If I were to book a really cheap Airbnb, I'd be a bit suspicious and would definitely bring a blacklight, a mattress protector and a gallon of bleach. 3 weeks later, the mother of the family and Elizabeth, who was the oldest daughter, went to the bank with a letter of credit to cash some money. Because of the large amount of francs, the bank insisted it be delivered to the house by a clerk, but when she gave the address for the house in Place du Lion d'Or, the clerk looked shocked. Lady Pennyman was confused and asked if there was anything wrong, to which the man explained that the house in question had been left unlet for years due to stories of a revenant haunting it. The mother laughed at the remark, but the manager just looked at her in a serious manner. When Lady Pennyman left with Elizabeth, they both burst out with laughter. The mother then told the girl that they shouldn't mention the remark to the servants so not to spook them. As they were walking home, the mother remarked jestfully, "I suppose, Bessie, that it was a ghost that woke us up by walking over our heads. Bessie being a popular nickname for Elizabeth since the 16th century. In the letter to Lord Halifax, Elizabeth said that she had been sharing a room with her mother, and on 3 or 4 nights they had been awakened by slow, heavy footsteps above them, which they thought must have been one of the manservants walking around. The Pennyman staff consisted of a footman who had been with the family for years, a coachman and a groom for the horses. They also had a maid and a housekeeper, another maid for Elizabeth, and a nursery maid for the youngest children. The chances of the footsteps belonging to one of these many staff members was completely rational, but a few days after learning of the building's haunted reputation, and after being awakened again by footsteps, Lady Pennyman, who was also named Elizabeth, asked Cresswell, her maid, who it was sleeping in the room above theirs. Cresswell quickly replied, "No one, my lady. It is a large empty garret." Around a week later, Cresswell rushed into the room just after breakfast and announced that the French servants in the house were talking about leaving because the house was haunted. It was then that the Pennymans learned of the building's dark history. She explained that a young man who was heir to the building they were living in and another house with a large estate in the country was locked up by his uncle in an iron cage within the building. People saw the young man less and less, only ever accompanied by his uncle, until he was never seen again. As planned, the properties went into the ownership of the uncle after the boy disappeared and was declared dead. Soon after, the uncle left the house and sold it to the father of the man who rented it to the Pennymans. She went on to tell the matriarch of the family that no one had remained in the house as long as they had, and had been without a tenant for years. "And do you believe this, Cresswell?" asked Lady Pennyman. "Well," she replied, "the iron cage is in the garret over your head, my lady, and I wish you would come up and see it." Yep, the same iron cage which was said to be the prison for the young man in the last miserable years of his life. At that moment, a friend of the family, an old military officer, came to visit. They excitedly recounted the story and asked him to accompany them upstairs to see the cage. The group found themselves in a long, large attic with bare brick walls holding up the wooden beams of the house. It was completely empty, except that in the furthest corner was an iron cage attached to the wall. Elizabeth described it as the type of iron cage that a wild animal would be kept in, only it had been constructed to be tall. In fact, it was 4 feet by 8 feet tall, with an iron ring bolted into the wall with a rusty chain connected to it, which was fed through the cage with a collar on the other end. Their excitement and entertainment soon turned into horror, as the idea of a human being kept in such horrible conditions for so long was inconceivable. Despite the chilling evidence that seemingly supported the haunting, Lord and Lady Pennyman believed that this was all part of a plan to keep the house empty, like a plot from Scooby-Doo, with outsiders sneaking into the house and walking around at night to scare the family away. What did scare them, however, was there had to be a private way into the building that nobody living there knew about. The family decided to look for another place to stay, but would have to stay where they were until they found one. They were worried that the footsteps from the presumed intruders would turn into something more sinister, but little did they know, it wasn't the living they should have feared. About 10 days after the visit to the attic and the discovery of the cage, Cresswell, the maid, came to dress Lady Pennyman in the morning, looking incredibly pale and shaken up. Concerned, she asked the woman what was the matter. Sheepishly, she told the lady of the house that neither she nor Mrs. Marsh, Elizabeth's maid, could sleep in their room anymore. Mrs. Pennyman told them that they could stay in the spare room next to theirs, but asked them what had frightened them. The maid went on to say that when they were lying in their beds, they saw a male figure walk through the room. The 2 women hid under the bed sheets and lay in terror until the sun came up. Elizabeth, who was still sharing a room with her mother, burst out laughing, but Cresswell began to sob. Awkward. After realising that the woman was genuinely upset, she tried to comfort her. Elizabeth gave the woman a hug and told her that they had heard about a really nice house and would move into it as soon as they could. The room where they had seen the apparition had a door coming out on the first landing onto a very wide staircase, leading to the passage where the best rooms were, including Lady Pennyman's room. In Cresswell's old room, there was a second door which led to the back stairs, making it the perfect servant's passage. Hey, you can empty our bedpans and bring us breakfast. We just don't want to see you doing it. Also, don't forget to wash your hands in between doing those things. A few nights after the change of rooms, Lady Pennyman asked Charles and Elizabeth to fetch her long embroidery frame from her bedroom so that she could work on some clothing. Yes, before the endless dog-themed TikTok videos, people did other things to make themselves sleepy. Although it was after supper and quite dark, the pair didn't take candles as there was a lamp at the bottom of the staircase and thought their mother's room would be illuminated enough if they left the door open. When they reached the foot of the stairs, however, they saw a tall, thin figure with long hair wearing a powdering gown. It was slowly making its way up the stairs right in front of them. They both assumed it was their sister Hannah and immediately called out to her, saying that she couldn't frighten them. At those words, the figure turned into the recess towards Cresswell's old room. The pair gave chase but were left stunned to find that no one was in the cold, empty room. They returned to their mother with the frame and told her about Hannah's trick, but the mother was confused. She told them that it was very odd as Hannah had gone to bed with a headache. The three of them went to find the trickster, but discovered her maid quietly knitting. She told them that Hannah had been asleep for at least an hour and that it couldn't have been the girl they saw. When they later saw Cresswell and told her about what had happened, she exclaimed that it sounded like the same figure she saw in her room. One of the other Pennyman sons, William Henry, who was nicknamed Harry, came to spend 10 days with the family shortly after. One morning, he came storming down to breakfast angrily. He yelled at his mother, asking her if she thought he was blind drunk the previous night and thought he couldn't put out his own candle, as when the flame was blown out before he was ready, he opened the door to see a man at the stairs, illuminated by the moon through the skylight. He said that if he had anything on him, he would have taught him not to come spying on him while he slept. Imagine forgetting to put a candle out being the worst thing you could do after a night of drinking. Nowadays, the mother would have sent the servant in to grab his phone to prevent her son from suffering the beer fear when he woke up. Regardless, Lady Pennyman told him that she hadn't sent anyone and the person he saw was unaccounted for. That same day, the family went to see a new house which was described as delightful with a charming garden which was owned by a young nobleman who was going to Italy for a couple of years. Loving the house and probably just happy to escape the revenant, as they called it, they agreed to take the lease. Later that day, friends of the family, Mr. and Mrs. Atkins, and their son, who lived 3 or 4 miles away from Lille, came on horseback to see the Pennymans. Over tea and cucumber sandwiches, I imagine, they told them about the supposed hauntings that had frightened their servants and that they were worried someone was sneaking in to scare them away in the guise of a ghost. They also told them that no one would sleep in the room in which Cresswell and the other maid had seen the apparition. Mrs. Atkins laughed and said that with Lady Pennyman's permission, she would like to sleep in the room with her terrier to keep her company. The family was surprised, but Mrs. Atkins said that with her loyal pooch, she wouldn't be scared at all. Wow, that must have been one ferocious terrier. The lady of the house said it would be fine, if she was sure, and Mr. Atkins and their son rode home to fetch Mrs. Atkins' things before the gates were shut for the night. That night, everyone went to bed as usual, but in the morning, Mrs. Atkins came down the stairs looking pale and ill, as if she had been kept up all night. When the family asked if she was okay, the woman said that she had been kept awake by the sound of someone moving around in her room all night. Her little protector, however, didn't stir at all, who was said to usually fly at intruders. During the loud shuffling and footsteps, Mrs. Atkins plucked up the courage to look over the bed sheets. By the lamp next to the chimney, she could clearly see a figure standing there, illuminated by the flickering orange light, just staring at her. She said that she tried to set the dog on the figure, but the creature did nothing. Elizabeth went on to say that they believed the dog was just too frightened to do anything. When Mr. Atkins arrived later that morning to pick up his wife, he dryly said, "Perhaps you dreamt it all." Classic dismissive partner phrase. While the Pennyman family laughed after they were once again alone, Mrs. Pennyman said that she didn't believe it could be a ghost, but she hoped that she could move out sooner as she didn't want to see the thing frightening people. It seems to me that the lady of the house did believe it was a ghost, but didn't want to scare the children. or that she was in denial that she believed it was a ghost but didn't want to face that reality. Of course, it could have simply been that she believed people were sneaking in and that the notion of ghosts and spirits were nothing but senseless doohickey. 3 days before the family were to move into the new house, Elizabeth had been on a long horse ride and went to bed tired. It was a hot night and the curtains around the bed were undrawn on her side, and at the foot of the bed, she was in a deep sleep until she suddenly woke up, although she had no idea why. Elizabeth and her mother had got used to the phantom footsteps above their head in the attic, so much so that they started sleeping through them. They had kept the lamp always burning in their room, out of fear an intruder would enter, so when Elizabeth sat up to see what had woke her, her whole body was paralysed in fear to see a tall thin figure wearing a long gown, with one of his arms resting on the chest of drawers. The apparition was facing the bed, just watching her. His face was long, thin and ghostly pale. She said that he looked like a young man with a sad expression on his face. While Elizabeth was terrified, her worst fear was that her mother would wake up and see the man. Fortunately, she was in a deep sleep and had no idea she was in the presence of an unearthly intruder. At that moment, the clock on the stairs struck 4, which just happens to be during the witching hour, which you can learn more about in this video here. After an hour of hiding under the bed sheets, Elizabeth plucked up the courage to speak out, but saw nobody else in the room. Also, she didn't hear any doors open or shut during that time. The girls stayed awake until morning, when Cresswell came to wake them up. Elizabeth said that she didn't have to get up to unlock the door, as her mother must have forgotten to lock it, but the key was actually on the chest of drawers, and the door had been locked. When Elizabeth told her mother about the terrifying experience, Lady Pennyman said that she was grateful that she didn't wake up. She then insisted that the family leave the house that very day. Directly after breakfast, the family began moving their things so that they could stay in their new lodgings. Before they left, Cresswell and Elizabeth searched every part of the room for a secret entrance, but found nothing. The girl knew that the intruder didn't leave through the door and that she never heard the figure move from the chest of drawers. So how did the person leave the room before Cresswell arrived? The Pennyman family left that day and spent the rest of their holiday in peace. Elizabeth said she never returned to Lille after that autumn, out of fear that the tortured spirit of the unfortunate heir would somehow track down the only kind of family he had ever known. A ghost story being supported by respectable eyewitnesses and the physical cage to back up its chilling past caught the attention of ghost enthusiasts of the time. Catherine Crowe published extracts of Elizabeth's letter, sharing a story in her book The Night Side of Nature, published in 1853. Augustus Hare, a writer and collector of true ghost stories, also included a paraphrase of the story, naming the family in volume 2 of his autobiography, The Story of My Life, which was published in 1896. In 1906, the well-known scholar and folklorist Sabine Baring-Gould published the story in the November 1907 issue of the Cornhill magazine, entitled The Man in the Iron Cage. In this publication, he reprinted Elizabeth's letter in full. The story became incredibly popular, so much so that Dickens included his own version in one of his books, A Christmas Tree, which was an anthology of Christmas stories published in 1850. Although he set his story in Kent and the cage became a closet, it is still one of Dickens' scariest tales. The story of the Man in the Iron Cage became an incredibly popular story told for the decades that followed, right up to and after Elizabeth Pennyman passed away at the age of 83 in 1848. The basement of the building the Pennymans stayed in was later converted into a butcher's shop, and all the rooms within the building were converted into apartments for small families. 100 years after the story of the haunting was first released, someone asked the owner of the poultry house about the ghost, but they said they had not heard of any haunting, and that to their knowledge, there was no cage in the attic of the building. The French Revolution and the war between France and England broke all relationships between the two countries, and by 1815, when the war ended, France had changed and the details of the story had been lost within the community of Lille. I've tried finding out which building the haunting took place in and how it looks today, but only found it was one of two large important buildings in Place du Lion d'Or, but as the location has grown since then, it's hard to pinpoint. My best guess is that it's either House 15 in Place du Lion d'Or, which had its facade and roof registered as a historic monument on February 12, 1927, or the Lee Lion Immobile building, which is now an estate agent's. The reason why this was Lord Halifax's favourite ghost story is clear to me. It has a tragic backstory and several eyewitness accounts that were all very similar in description and were shared by people who were highly respected in society. Telling tales of ghosts and hauntings was risky back then. It could have hurt their business by branding them crackpots or hoaxers. To Lord Halifax, this story was the most compelling piece of evidence of the existence of ghosts and the beyond, and as he reached the end of his life, it was proof that he would continue to exist in the afterlife. A reassurance everyone watching this video probably longs for too. I know I do. So was choosing this to be the last story read to him before he passed away that strange? Probably not. To those who are avid believers in the paranormal, it was probably more comforting than being given last rites. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support my channel, please consider subscribing, giving the video a like and leaving a comment. Also, I'm now on Facebook and Instagram where you can connect to me directly and see the junk that I get up to, so hopefully see you there. And until next time, sleep well, friends.